Okay, not to start off on the wrong foot here, but I am pissed. I am pissed off. I am positively seething with indignant rage. Right, context. I try to subscribe to as many GD review channels as possible, which amounts to like 2 of them. You've got Colon and Viprin and nobody else. Nobody else with a large following anyway. For as large as this community is, it's legitimately kind of baffling that there isn't more of this type of content out there. I guess most of the discussion and critique happens elsewhere, in comment sections and Discord feedback channels. There are some smaller channels I follow as well though, among whom is Nothing is Scary. You may or may not have heard about him. He's pretty underground. I just hope he isn't the most wanted as well. Anyway, he recently released a video titled, "What is the Perfect 9 Circles Sequel?" which I want to talk about a little bit because it highlights a big problem with level criticism I have in this community. The structure of this video hinges on a major misstep he makes right at the start. He finishes up his introduction and then says this.
So I had to take a step back and try to look at this from an objective standpoint using different sets of criteria.
I'm not going to keep dogging on Nothing is Scary because he really doesn't deserve it. Besides, he's by far not the only one to take this sort of approach to reviewing levels. There seems to be a very pervasive idea that there are objective markers to judge a level by, and that you should stick to those criteria to avoid being unbiased. One very funny example of this is a tweet by Team Cherry that they still haven't deleted, so I have to assume that this is all being completely sincere. Let's go over it for a second. I'll skip over the irrelevant details, but feel free to pause the video and read the tweet right now if you want the full context. Be careful though, it's a doozy. In reality, there aren't that many criteria for evaluating levels in GD. Colors, dynamics, song interpretation, originality, theme, gameplay, and so on. These are objective criteria. They're simple and clear. There we have that word again, objective. I swear, this is my trigger word. Okay, so why is this a problem? Well, you might notice that Cherry doesn't actually give any supporting arguments why these criteria are objective at all. They just kind of say it as if it's self-evidently true, but that obviously doesn't work. If you're claiming these criteria are objective, you have to make a case for why that's true. But this is where Cherry runs into a problem, because any argument they could make would have to come from their own values. Take originality for example. They might say, oh, well, originality is good because derivative levels aren't as interesting. We've seen them before, they're boring. Fresh ideas are more stimulating. You might notice though that this is not a verifiable objective statement. This is an opinion. Someone else might come along and say that they enjoy when levels iterate on the same ideas over and over again, and that seeing which one executes the same concept the best is very satisfying for them, and they wouldn't necessarily be wrong. I disagree with this hypothetical person, but I think plenty of other people must feel this way, considering the unceasing popularity of the 9 Circles trend.
If I just said something like Fear Me was a good 9 Circles remake, well, I'd be right. It's a really good one.
Wrong, bucko. Sorry, that was uncalled for. The only other way you can really argue the objectivity of these criteria is if you were to say they were divinely inspired by God in order for us to pursue beauty or whatever. This is an extremely religious argument though, and I don't think this is a particularly religious community, so I'm going to leave it by the wayside here. All I'll say is that this argument predicates on the existence of a deity, which is an assumption I'm just not on board with. But GD Twitter thinks it has cooler criteria, like passion. Wow, fucking great criterion. Who better than a random fuckwit from Twitter to know what emotions and approach went into building the level, what the level's story was, and so on. Again, I'm not seeing any objectively verifiable statements here debunking perceived passion as a valid criterion for art analysis. This is just petulant whining. On top of that, it also insinuates that the goal of art analysis is to understand what the creator was trying to say, but I don't think that's true at all. Whatever you do when you look at a piece of art, like a Geometry Dash level, you're going to look at it from your own perspective. Your interpretation is always going to be colored by your own experiences, opinions, values, all that good stuff. The emotions you feel and the message you derive from it are purely your own, and it's completely possible that the creator intended something completely different. You could even ask them. You might have a deeply fulfilling experience with their level while they just say, "Oh, what? No, I just made the curtains blue because I like the color blue." But would that make your experience with the level any less valid and meaningful to you? Because I don't think so. The emotions you experienced and the value you derived from the art are real, after all. I think Patricia Taxon's video about "Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared" is a good example of this. In it, she goes over her experience watching the titular web series, relating it to her experiences as a kid with autism. I don't know how likely it is that this interpretation is what the creators were going for, but I still find it a very insightful and thought-provoking perspective. I don't have autism, I think, but Patricia's unique take on it allowed me to see the show in a new light and grow my understanding of what autistic people go through, especially when people make no effort to listen to them. If you only accept authorial intent as the true meaning of an artwork, you will miss out on perspectives like that. And for what? Ultimately, the author's perspective is just another opinion. You can make an argument for why we should hold it in higher regard, but you wouldn't be able to make any objective statements to support it. So in my book, the author's perspective is just as valid as anyone else's. Of course, that doesn't mean it's not worth considering, but it also doesn't supersede anyone else's. Anyway, after this, it becomes increasingly clear why Cherry posted this tweet in the first place. They clearly and obviously have a dog in this fight, and its name is Cosmos. They go on a big rant about how Cosmos is being unfairly criticized because it's well promoted. And it honestly reads like an entitled screed from a Hollywood executive after their trillionth superhero movie received criticism for being uninspired and soulless. There's so much anger in this tweet. How are they not embarrassed by it? Truly insane. So does that mean there's absolutely no room for objective analysis in Geometry Dash levels? Let's ask Stormfly, the final boss of art criticism in Geometry Dash. About a year ago, Stormfly released this video. GD community's art criticism is worthless, to critical acclaim. I think this video falls in a lot of the same pitfalls as the Team Cherry tweet, though it is somewhat masked by his composed demeanor and professional language. And to his credit, Stormfly actually argues his case with some thought put into it instead of going on a Twitter screed. I'm not going to play his video here, but feel free to watch it for yourself if you want the full context. I'll put it in the description for you, as well as any other videos I mention. So, according to Stormfly, objectivity comes in when it comes to the effectiveness with which the creator attempts to communicate their message. And by the way, quick little side note, this message doesn't have to be anything profound. It can be as simple as conveying a general calmness or stress, just the feeling you want to instill in the player as they play the level. It can be more in-depth and profound than that, but it doesn't have to be to still be considered art, I think. Anyway, Stormfly mentions some what he argues are objective criteria when it comes to art. Form and value, color harmony, the use of design tools. I'm confident he would include things like perspective and anatomy here too, just to cement the idea he's getting across here. He argues that the competence with which you execute these criteria determines how effective you are at delivering the message you want to imbue in your art. After all, how are you going to get across the quiet beauty of your local European city when you suck at perspective? Man, this artist would never get accepted into art school. If we were to translate this to Geometry Dash, I'm sure Stormfly would reference the criteria he listed in his Extreme Demons video. Gameplay, decoration, originality, and music sync/representation. So is this it then? Have we finally found it? Objective art analysis?
No!
It's the most compelling case I've seen so far, to be sure. Art pieces that do well in these criteria are generally considered good art, after all. You can already kind of see the problem though, right? No objective statements are being made here. Just because something is generally considered good doesn't mean it's objectively good. You have to consider that the criteria we discussed are all informed by the human experience. The way we draw perspective, for example, is informed by the way our eyes work. We can easily imagine a being who does not see perspective the way we do, where things become smaller in size the closer they get to the horizon. Vsauce has an interesting video about this. They could look at this drawing of railroad tracks and say, wow, why do they converge like that? Railroad tracks don't do that. This is a bad drawing, and they would be completely justified in saying that.
Man, they would have no idea about perspective the way we do. The way railroad tracks converge together, the way when you look at a cube, the back face seems to be smaller than the front face. Their lives would be completely different, but they wouldn't be wrong.
You might say, okay, but We aren't aliens or something. We're humans. We do see perspective like that, so it does apply to us. But this is introducing bias. If your argument is that art is objectively good if it appeals to the sensibilities of the average human, you've already lost because that isn't objective truth. That is just your opinion. It isn't a fact of the universe. If humanity went extinct today, the moon would still be 1/6 the diameter of the Earth. This is an objective fact that you can measure independent from the human mind. But the Mona Lisa would stop being beautiful because there would be no humans to argue that it is so. It relies on our subjective experience. On top of that, it's not even like human perspective is universal either. It varies wildly from person to person, from location to location, and from time period to time period. If these criteria were truly objective, shouldn't all of this be at least roughly the same? You can present the same math problem to a bunch of different people, and they'll all arrive at the same answer, because the answer is objectively verifiable. Ask a group of people to rank the best extreme demons, and shit becomes wildly inconsistent. If there truly were objective criteria to measure, you wouldn't see this much disagreement. Now, this does not mean that learning about perspective, color harmony, music sync, gameplay, etc. are all worthless. If you want to make art that appeals to people, this is still pretty important. Heck, chances are you value these things yourself as well, just as I do. So even if you want to make art just for the sake of it, not aiming to appeal to anyone's taste but your own, it's still valuable to learn. If you're aiming to break convention too, you still need to know what the conventions actually are. People seem to think that if you accept the subjectivity of art analysis, all of this would become meaningless, but I don't think that's the case at all. So what does all of this mean for level criticism in Geometry Dash? Well, I think the attempted adherence to objectivity leads to incredibly boring level criticism. Stormfly talks about wanting people to have the tools to perform their love for art, but I think I'm doing pretty well the way I'm going. And I think the people who watch me can vouch for me on this, even if they don't always agree with me. They can rely on me for having a consistent voice and a unique perspective on levels that I hope gives people a new way of looking at things. A new way to maybe appreciate positives or flaws they might not have considered before. That's the kind of reviews I strive to make, because that's the kind of reviews I enjoy seeing the most myself. It's why I brought up that video by Patricia Taxon earlier too. I'm being completely open and honest about my feelings and interpretations when I review a level, and I think my body of work speaks to that. So how does Stormfly go about reviewing levels? Well, his reviews feel entirely artificial to me. He tries his best to shut himself off from his own opinions, which results in a completely detached and uninspiring review. The Extreme Demons video, for example, doesn't lead me to consider any new perspectives because Stormfly tries his best to scrub out his own perspective as much as possible.
And know how much you enjoy playing a level means f***ing nothing when rating how objectively good a level is. Enjoyment rate is subjective, period.
Alright Stormfly, calm down. It just so happens that the other factors you mentioned are subjective as well. I'm sorry to say, but this makes for a profoundly boring review style. And I'm not the only one. Listen to what mindcap has to say about the subject.
The problem I have with most level reviews now is that they don't look at the bigger picture. They just seemingly describe everything part by part to see what it looks like. Is that this part uses this effect, and this effect looks cool. This part kind of lacks in colors. And you just go on till the level ends. You just don't say anything about the whole level experience or like how it like represents you or makes you feel. Like it just feels too like checkboxy, you know?
This is why accepting the fact that criticism is ultimately subjective is so liberating to me. It makes for better content in my opinion, but it's also just a lot more fun for me to be able to just say what's on my mind about the level without worrying about being objective and impartial. Now, that doesn't mean I'll just say shit for no reason. Criticism being subjective does not mean you don't still have to make your case for why you hold the opinions you do. You have to cross-reference the level and make arguments that are supported by its design. Your opinions have to at least make sense in the context of the level and your other reviews. Doing this over an extended period of time allows people to see what kind of levels you respond to, and allows them to judge your worth as a critic by how consistent you are with your criticisms. I think this approach is how you create reviews that still have value to people who might disagree with you, because you're inviting them to consider an alternative viewpoint instead of trying to claim to speak objective truth and beating them over the head with it. To give you an example that isn't from my own channel, I'd like to refer you to a video that was uploaded only a few days after Stormfly's video. A video by Pock discussing Sweet Dude's level Melody. Melody is an infamous level because of that one Etzer video, and I for one got completely caught up in its terrible reputation. It's an easy level to hate after all. Pock does a really good job deconstructing this prejudice though, and showed me a new way to appreciate the level as an expression of the joy of making art, which I find very valuable in retrospect. I don't really dislike Melody anymore, even if the gameplay in this level still doesn't do it for me. That aspect of the level still blows, sadly. In fact, if it was a little more fun to play, I think I could totally get lost in the sauce of this level, the same way Pock seems to. In conclusion, I think striving for objectivity in level criticism is a suffocating and pointless venture. You're not speaking to some underlying truth to the level, and your reviews are worse off for it. Embrace the chaos, open your heart, and speak your mind. This can actually be pretty intimidating if you aren't used to it, but it's so freeing when you commit to it. All of this is my subjective opinion though. Feel free to make your disagreements known in the comments. Winky face. A friendly reminder that I'm hosting a creator contest. You can watch the video like at the end card here. And thanks for watching my video. I really appreciate it. Anyway, no need to really drag this out. You know what to do. Oh, thanks for 10,000 subscribers, by the way. I haven't actually said it in a video yet, huh? But yeah. Please keep doing that. I like it when the number goes up. Anyway, see you next time.